Let's talk 观点好谈. Today we have the honor to have with us a renowned documentary filmmakers whose work delves into the intricacies of geopolitics and identity. Joining us is Leo Jiang, whose latest documentary film sheds light on the fascinating story of the island of金门. And his film not only captured the beauty and history of金门, also explores the complex interplay between Taiwan, China, and the United States. It is worth noting that his documentary has garnered significant recognition and also earning a nomination in the Best Documentary Short Films category at the United States Academy Awards. So today we have the privilege of delving deeper into the themes and the insights explored in his remarkable work. Welcome, Leo. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Leo, so my first question would go to why did you choose to make a documentary about金门?
I actually was looking to make a documentary really about Taiwan, but as we know, those of us who spend time in Taipei or live in Taipei, when you're in Taipei, you don't really necessarily see any of the cross-strait tension. People are kind of going on with their lives. People are, going to night markets and going to the hot springs, and there isn't anything that demonstrates what what the international readers and audiences have been hearing about, which is the escalating tension between Taiwan and China. But if you go to金门, you'll see, artifacts from the war from 70 years ago. You see bullet holes in, traditional southern Chinese buildings. So I had this idea to use the images of金门, but ultimately to talk about the experience of Taiwanese people during this particular time.
Now, how do you perceive金门's position between Taiwan and China? Could it be potentially resemble with Crimea in the Russian-Ukraine conflict?
Well, I think that's an interesting question. I certainly have local金门friends who compare themselves to Crimea. I think it's not an unfair comparison. There's definitely a close cultural tie, right, between金门and China, the way that Crimea does have, with Russia. It is right on the border. But at the same time, I'm not sure, the idea of annexation seems kind of far-fetched. I would imagine that at this moment, during this heightened tension, especially between China and the U.S., if Chinese government takes an action as such, it will probably have quite a serious repercussion. So, I'm not quite sure, but I think the cultural comparison feels accurate.
I see. Well,金门's political affiliation lies with Taiwan. Its economy actually depends on China. So what is your perspective on this phenomenon?
Well, I think that's what it is, right? I do feel like, most folks that I talk to in金门, they do want closer ties with China because of the economic relationship, because of the family relationship, right? Many people, have relatives on the other side. Some of them, when the relationships were better, have gone over there and invested in real estate and have bank accounts and whatnot. So of course they want that pipeline, that bridge to be open. But I don't think I've ever spoken to anybody who says, well, we prefer the political system on the other side of the strait. Most folks are quite, strong believers of the Taiwanese democracy. So, I think it is this sort of complicated, complex relationship that I wanted to explore with my film.
Were you able to actually explore those complicated relationships within your film?
I think the feedback I'm hearing from folks is that this is a much more nuanced look at the cross-strait relationship. Than this really simplistic look that, the simplistic idea that, these are two opposing, hostile sides with nothing in common. That we all know that that's clearly not true. And in many ways, it's interesting to use金门to illustrate that, but it's also interesting to use my personal, experience of being somebody who have moved around Taiwan, China, and the U.S. and my point of view on this. So I hope that it has, opened up a little bit more of an insight for the international audience as they look at not only Jinmen, but definitely, the Taiwan and China.
Well, your work also suggests that compared to Taiwan, the political atmosphere in Jinmen is relatively peaceful, and the perceived threat from China seems less pronounced. So what are your personal thoughts on this?
Of being in Jinmen or in Taiwan? In
Jinmen, and also seeing that actually in Jinmen is more peaceful than what Taiwanese people actually perceive the threats from China.
Right. Sure. I mean, I think that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, I feel like the way that Taiwanese perceive Jinmen is the way that the rest of the world perceives Taiwan. People in Taiwan, they perceive Jinmen probably thinking, oh, this is a very, tense place. People probably are constantly worrying about, what's the relationship going to be like with the other side? How is that going to impact our daily lives? And that simply is not the case. People that I met in Jinmen, yes, they are thinking about it, but they're not spending all their time thinking about that. They're building their families. They're working on their careers. The same way that the people in the Taiwanese main island, Taiwanese main islands do exactly the same, instead of what the international people are perceiving, which is that people are sitting around and pulling their hair out about, China's gonna do something, drastic or anything like that. So I think that's a really interesting parallel to think about.
Yeah, it's very interesting because we know that they are in the front line, they're the closest to China, but actually they perceive it very differently with people that's more distance from it. And also we know that in Jinmen, they still use Teresa Deng Lijun's as a theme of psychological warfare. So how do you view this phenomenon?
Well, that's really, it's really there for tourists. It's a tourist attraction. I don't think anybody really actually thinks that, the music is blasting across to Xiamen and it's changing the minds of people in Xiamen. I think what you see with that broadcast wall is a time capsule, right? It's a commemoration of something that the KMT government did, for the past, maybe not the past 7 years, but at least during the time when the propaganda war was much more heightened and much more physical, right? Instead of now, it's really more about social media and manipulating, news and all that. But in the old days, you literally just blast this piece of music and try to create nostalgia and envy, right? From the Taiwan side towards the China side. But I do think that the both the wall and also that tank, that's in the film and all these other, tourist attractions, on the Cayman Islands, on the Jinmen Islands are very much a reminder of what it used to be. And, if we're not careful, what could also become the situation again in Jinmen.
That's very true. And you have mentioned that you worked in China and lived in both the United States and Taiwan. So in your documentary, you described the situation as being like a child fought over by 3 guardians. Does this refer to the Taiwanese people as well in general? Why do you describe this in this way?
Well, I think for me, maybe I feel that way because I do spend a large amount of time in the U.S. But I do feel like as people, right, as members of the Taiwanese society, I don't think many of us really feel like we have a say in the future of our country or of our society. We're at the mercy of these much bigger neighbors, China and then U.S. as well. And also, so much of these relationships, these dysfunctional relationships, between the Taiwanese government and the U.S. government, it's both dependent, but also Taiwan does need the U.S. support, and certainly between Taiwanese government and the Chinese government, there's a lot of performance of what that relationship actually is, who belongs to where and what the history is between the two sides, and what the trade relationships are like, the passports and the IDs that are used are if you think about it, it's actually quite absurd. It's everybody pretending to be something that it actually isn't, which is that Taiwan's a separate society, has a separate system, has a separate government than China. but that's not what what the three parties are saying out in public. So it is really dysfunctional, and it is so absurd, if you just think about it a little bit more.
Definitely, it's very relatable as Taiwanese. And also, what is your observation that the biggest difference among United States, Taiwan, and China from your perspective then?
The biggest difference between the three places?
Yep.
Well, I mean, that's a very huge question, right? I mean, I think that these are three, even though there are similarities, right, between these three places, but I think when you dig in deeper, they're very, very, very different cultures and very different societies, right? The U.S. and Taiwan have the democracy in common. Taiwan does, have Taiwanese people have a lot of knowledge of American pop culture. I mean, that's always amusing. But between Taiwan and China, it's that there is this common ethnic history, right? For the majority of the Taiwanese who are ethnic Chinese, even though many now, myself included, really identify nationally as a Taiwanese, not a Chinese. But I don't think that I need to negate my connection, as an ethnic Chinese person. But the system is very different, and then there's, I feel like there's actually a lot of contrast between U.S. and China. But I think that what I'm trying to make, the point I'm trying to make with the film is that no matter how different the infrastructure, the government system that we lived in, I feel like people are people, and people can relate to each other. We all want to have love in our lives. We all want our families to thrive. We all want to have a peaceful, successful existence. And I don't think that we should let these sort of absurd, governmental policies, decisions, and the fact that some of these are really relics from 70 years of Cold War interfere with the human connection, interfere with the fact that we can feel empathetic for people who are supposedly on the other side and relate. And because of this connection, this human connection, that we can focus on, maintaining peace and celebrating human lives and human existence.
Definitely, and I'd like to congratulate you on whatever you just said that you're trying to achieve through this film. You're trying to send out this message the world sees as you're nominated for the Oscar. This is a significant achievement. What does this symbolize for you personally as well?
Well, for me, as a documentary filmmaker who has been doing this work for more than 20 years, I mean, this is an incredible acknowledgement for me of my work. I feel very, very excited and very, very grateful to be acknowledged by my peers, by other documentarians in this way. In terms of for the story, I do think that because of this acknowledgement, because of the nomination, more people are more likely to search out the film and watch the film, and hopefully they will, get a glimpse into what it's like to be in Jinmen, what it's like to be a Taiwanese person at this time, and the concerns that we have with the situation. And I hope that they do, receive this message of peace that I am trying to advocate for.
And also looking forward, what other things would you like to explore in your next project?
I am already making a personal film, even more personal than this one, about my family's immigration experience, and maybe using that to examine the long and complex relationship between Taiwan and U.S. over the past several decades. I'm also thinking that it will be a really interesting film to do, to make a film about Teresa Teng. For the international audience. I mean, of course, there's been many profiles of Teresa Teng for the people that know who she is, for her fans. But I think it might be a really interesting vehicle to again, take a deeper look at the long and winding geopolitical relationship in the Chinese diaspora. Sorry, in the Chinese diaspora through the music of Teresa Teng.
Wow. Well, those all sounds very exciting projects, and we do look forward to it. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing with us your expertise today, Leo.
Thank you for having me.